What the Immaculate is a 2024 psychological horror/thriller directed by Michael Mohan and starring Sydney Sweeney as the main character, Cecelia. In this film, Sydney Sweeney's character, Cecelia, travels to the Italian countryside to a remote convent in hopes of becoming a nun. Quickly after her arrival to this remote convent, Cecelia starts to take notice of some strange things happening around the place. And her perspective starts to change once she starts to discover the unspeakable horrors that are happening inside this convent. Now, to be completely honest, I did not expect much out of this movie at all before I went to go see it. In fact, Braden, who helps run the channel, sent a message to me and he's like, "Hey Josh, you want to go see Immaculate this weekend for the channel?" And I'm like, sure, why not? But I really wasn't too thrilled about it. I had kind of glanced through the trailer and I had seen the movie poster, and when I saw Sydney Sweeney dressed as a nun and I kind of skimmed through the trailer, I was like, ah man, like this doesn't really look that great. It had like a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I was like, okay, maybe there's some redeeming parts of this movie or something like that. But everyone knows, if you see my reviews on this channel, that I'm a huge horror fan. I'm the biggest horror fan on this channel. But I cannot stress enough how tired I am of the creepy nun, religious, paranormal horror cliche that we seem to get in a few movies every single year. Stuff like The Conjuring and Nun and all that stuff. I just am not a fan of that. I don't really like paranormal movies. They're just not that scary to me. I just am not that interested in them. But this movie goes way beyond anything paranormal, and the horrors that lie within the convent in this movie are because of the people in it. Nothing paranormal, no ghosts. The people are the monsters, and to me, that storyline is more intriguing than anything paranormal. Is when the people are the monsters. To me, that is more creepy. That is more eerie. 10 times out of 10, I will choose the movie where human beings are the things to be afraid of. But to give a little bit more context on this movie's plot, Sydney Sweeney's character, Cecelia, arrives to this convent. Things start to happen around the place, and one of the major events that takes place in this movie is Sydney Sweeney's character gets pregnant despite never having relations with a man. So after this is discovered by the people that run the convent, they treat her as if she is the new Virgin Mary, and that, you know, this is like a huge thing. This is a big break for the convent. They haven't produced a virgin mother in years, and they've been trying over and over again, and this is their gift from God. And so they kind of treat Sydney Sweeney like she is a queen, and she gets all those special treatment and everything like that. And again, she's never had relations with a man. She doesn't know how she got pregnant. So she kind of starts to believe that this is her calling, and God brought her here for a reason, and her being pregnant despite not having relations with a man was just yet another sign from God that she was in the right place. And the movie really kind of pulls you into that idea, and you can tell Sydney Sweeney, who was fantastic in this movie. I mean, I will get into that a little bit later, but this movie really kind of rests on the shoulders of Sydney Sweeney's acting, and she was incredible in this. But she really starts to believe that this is where she belongs, and she just wants to belong, and this is just a sign for her that everything is going right, and this is exactly what she wanted. This is exactly what she needed. Her character, when she's younger, it alludes to the fact that she had a near-death experience, and so she just really became appreciative of God and life, and that's why she was driven to be a nun, and here everything just seems to be coming together. Now, some of this stuff kind of happens before Sydney Sweeney even discovers that she's pregnant in this movie, but a lot of it happens after. But there's a lot of weird stuff, and no offense to anyone that is super religious or anything like that, but this movie definitely does kind of unnerve you a little bit, because a lot of the religion stuff that they do in this movie, like, it's meant to be perceived as like super weird, and like Sydney Sweeney, even her character, questions like, what is this? Like, why are we doing this? And a lot of people that show up to watch this movie that don't share the same religion as portrayed in the movie are going to find some of this stuff weird. That's just how it is. And there's times in this movie where Sydney Sweeney's character encounters things that she finds to be a bit strange, like people having an episode on the floor, and then one of the nuns is like, oh, that's just a normal thing, just having a moment with God. But a lot of stuff happens after Sydney Sweeney discovers that she's pregnant. That's when it really starts to ramp up, and she starts to kind of lurk around the place at night to try and find stuff out. She's having some crazy dreams. she just starts to wise up as to what's going on. And there's a moment in this movie where Sydney Sweeney finally goes, this place is not good. This place is not right. I need to get the hell out of here. And I'm not going to spoil this movie too much, but there is one scene that I'm going to talk about because it definitely goes into my positives. I just have to talk about it. And that is when Sydney Sweeney realizes that this place is not what it seems, because there is another girl nun in this movie that is here at this convent trying to be a nun, and all of a sudden she just goes crazy. She's like, oh my god, there was another nun that killed herself here, that was for a reason, and now you're pregnant, 5 months pregnant, even though you're not supposed to be, and like, fuck this place, I'm out. Like, she just goes insane. And then it shows her getting carried away by the priest and then another nun and all that stuff. And then we don't really see what happens to her until Sydney Sweeney wakes up in the middle of the night and hears some crying and screaming going on outside of her window. She grabs a flashlight, starts to look around, and then she finds this room where the screaming is coming from, kind of peeks in the crack of the door or a keyhole or something like that, and they show the girl that was questioning this place getting her tongue cut off by people in black robes with red masks. And so the antagonist in this movie really is a cult that lives within this convent. They masquerade as a convent and a place that just worships God, and it's all about Catholicism, when really it's not that at all. And they're here to produce a virgin mother to try and validate themselves, and really they're just full of shit. And they will eliminate anyone, or anyone that questions them will face the severe consequences if they don't agree with the practices of the convent or question as to why they're there. So, like I said, I walked into this movie being very skeptical, and I feel like I walked out being like, damn, that was actually a pretty good movie. The Rotten Tomatoes score backs up everything that I just saw. To get into the pros, Sydney Sweeney's character, absolutely incredible. Like I said, Sydney Sweeney really has been making her rounds in the movies lately. She seems like she's everywhere. Every single movie poster you see, Sydney Sweeney is on it somewhere, and she's just really rising to stardom in this industry. And this movie just is another one in her collection of great movies that she's already done. And this character is a little bit different than anything she's ever done, and she really had to make herself seem like a devout Catholic, and she really bought into that, and her emotions that she displays in this movie were perfect, and you see a lot of that in the third act, just the pure emotion that is required for this role Sydney Sweeney is able to portray. And I do appreciate how this film really focused in on her ability as an actor, as opposed to her just being the attractive female that is in this movie to sell tickets, because let's be honest, a few of the movies that she's been in as of recently, a lot of people just go to see it because it's Sydney Sweeney and she's an attractive woman. And this wasn't quite that. Of course, I mean, there are some scenes in this where she has to like take a shower and she's nude or whatever, but it's not trying to show her off. This really does focus in on her ability as an actress, and I thought she did an incredible job once again. Now, this movie definitely has some cliche jump scares, and that's something that I've seen in a lot of other reviews for this movie so far, is it falls into some of those horror movie cliches, and yeah, it does, but at this point, guys, like, horror movies are gonna try to have a few jump scares pretty much 90% of the time, and so a lot of people are gonna complain about that. I'm not as big of a complainer about cliche jump scares, because every single type of jump scare that you could possibly do has been done at this point. So, like, I'm not here to complain and be like, oh, well, I've seen that jump scare 100 times. I knew that was coming. Well, yeah, if you've watched dozens and dozens of horror movies, you're conditioned to jump scares and you know when they're going to come. But that doesn't mean I don't think you should still put them in the movie. But what I did really like about this movie is that the score never overtook the scene and completely gave away what was happening. I really appreciate that when I was watching this movie in the theater, the music was very quiet, very subtle. It was eerie, though. It definitely added to the scene, but it was very quiet to the point that when you were sitting in that theater watching the movie, the only thing you could hear was what was happening in the scene, what was taking place. And I really appreciated that, how the score did not drown out the experience. This movie simply did a really good job building up that suspense and building up that dread. Now, as a horror movie guy, and more specifically a slasher guy, I like gore in my horror movies. Like, I'm a big Terrifier fan. You'll see a lot of Terrifier content on this channel. And if you guys have seen Terrifier before, you know that's a 10 out of 10 on the gore scale. So I'm pretty conditioned to seeing that stuff, and I'm not one to wince or look away or anything like that. I don't really care. That said, this movie has a lot more gore than you would expect, and there was definitely a few times in this movie where I was wincing a little bit because it's stuff that you just don't typically see, and the detail and the special effects were very good in this movie. Definitely made me feel a little bit queasy. There is a scene in this movie where one of the nuns at this convent commits suicide by jumping off a balcony, and they kind of show the carnage after the fact, and it will get you. I promise you that. And if you're not someone that can handle that stuff, or you don't like seeing fingers being bent back or fingernail stuff, then yeah, stay away from this movie. I also thought the camera work was great in this, and it should get a lot of credit because they took a lot of interesting angles, the transitions in and out of dream sequences. A lot of very interesting perspectives too, like a lot of the stuff that Sydney Sweeney sees when it shows you on the screen. It's either like looking through a keyhole, looking through a crack in the door, and you don't see too much of it, but you see just enough to understand what's going on, and it definitely adds to the creep factor in my opinion. I honestly don't have too many complaints about this movie. This is a very simple template for this movie. It is a 90-minute movie in and out, and there's not too many different characters that it has to focus in on. It's really all revolved around Sydney Sweeney, and again, rests on the shoulders of her acting ability. And so that makes this a very good movie. It makes it a worthy watch. If you want to go out and see it in the theater, I definitely recommend you do so. But I will say that with this being an hour and a half, I'm a little bit bummed because I definitely thought they could have added another 10 to 15 minutes in this movie and really kind of put the cherry on top in that third act, because I definitely feel like some things were moving a little too fast in the third act, and then the ending is a little bit abrupt in my opinion and made the movie a little bit less memorable. And then of course the ending is going to be a little bit controversial. I'm not going to spoil this movie in this review. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but you have to understand that this is a fucked up movie. Like, straight up, it is a fucked up movie. The ending epitomizes that, and it may be controversial. It may ruin the movie for you. It may make the movie for you, to be completely honest. I don't know. It just depends on how you see it and where you stand kind of in religion and morals and things of that nature. Not to say that this movie is like politically divisive or anything like that, because I don't think it is, but the ending is definitely something that if you don't stomach sensitive topics well, then just don't see it. And then I have one more small, tiny, not necessarily complaint, but just question about this movie, and maybe someone else interpreted this better than I did after watching the movie, and we'll say it down in the comments below. But it never does really explain how Sydney Sweeney got pregnant in this movie, and I feel like that should have been answered for me to appreciate this movie more, because that would have answered some questions about the ending. But maybe that's what they were going for, is that it's up to your own interpretation. But the movie, given that the convent ends up being a giant fraud, I feel like is implying that this place is full of shit and that the religion thing isn't real. Not to like attack anyone's beliefs or anything, but I feel like in this movie that's kind of what they're implying, is that like this whole religion thing is BS and this place is just pushing their own agenda. And so if that is the case, then how did Sydney Sweeney get pregnant? Or are they leaving the door cracked open to the idea that she actually is a virgin mother and God chose her to have this baby? That part I still don't understand. And maybe someone can answer that question for me down in the comments below, but it doesn't ruin the movie or anything. It's just one big question that I had, and I was like, well, hold on a second. So if this place is a fraud, then how is she pregnant? But it doesn't affect the movie too much for me. I still really enjoyed it. I thought this was a pretty damn good movie. I didn't expect a ton from it, and so I left the theater feeling really satisfied that I took the time to go out to the theater and watch this movie, and I'm probably going to watch it again after it comes out on streaming or if it's available to purchase. So this was one of the better surprises for me so far in 2024, but if you've already seen this movie, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of it. Would love to discuss this movie with you guys down in the comments below, and if you don't like spoilers, then don't go down to the comments. But with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe for more content on this channel. And make sure you turn on that notification bell so you can see my review for Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 later this week. See you all in the next one. Take care.